You're listening to Heroic Reflections, honoring the stories behind the service, hosted by Liam Steele. On this episode, Captain Ben Hodgkins, United States Marine Corps.
Thanks for meeting with me today.
Hey, Liam.
Can you start with why you joined?
Yeah. So I think, and who knows, maybe I watched too many movies when I was little, but I always wanted to be in the military to some degree. Actually, I started out wanted to be a pilot. I wanted to fly fighter jets.
Yeah.
I was always, running around playing with, fake rifles out in the woods and building fort. I always had that kind of that desire to do something like that after. And then when I was in high school, actually, my sophomore year of high school is when 9/11 happened. And so that was obviously, pretty impactful for, everything at that time. So when I was in high school, so I already had kind of that desire to be in the military in some form growing up. And then 9/11 happened. And then, a lot of folks that I knew, you see it on the news every day. You see guys over there, fighting, and that kind of turned my my desire from I wanted to be an astronaut, and I wanted to fly fighter jets, and I wanted to be, I wanted to command a battleship. And then it turned to, okay, well, how can I want to go do what they're doing. So then I decided to, go the Marine Corps route. Actually, not right away. Well, back up a little bit. I wanted to join right out of high school, and I don't know. Back up. I forgot to ask you this. So my mother, is it over in North Reading?
Mm-hmm.
Is that how
we got connected?
Okay. Yeah.
My wife talked to someone, I think, who talked to your mom.
Okay.
And that's how the connection happened. Yeah.
Okay. So my mom was not happy that I wanted to join the Marine Corps. And so I wanted to join initially out of high school. I wanted to enlist at 17. Mm-hmm. That was my big thing. I went and talked to recruiters, and there was some contentious discussions back when I was a 17, 18-year-old. My mother did not want me to join. She wanted me, first of all, she didn't want me to go in at all. Since she loves the Marine Corps now, but back then she was like, no way. And so we kind of had this compromise where I would go. She wanted me to go to college.
Yeah.
So I was like, I'll go to college first, and then, and at the time I didn't realize it, but that kind of led me to go the officer route. So when I was in college, I went to college at UMass Amherst. I was there. So I graduated high school in 2004. I went to UMass 2004 to 2008. Initially, I joined Army ROTC my freshman year of college, which was fun. And, I don't know if you're familiar with the two enlisted officer routes in the military. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but essentially, the officer roles are those are the billets and the jobs you have where you're either, more of in those leadership roles. Not that enlisted don't lead, but you have to be an officer to have those commanding type roles, like platoon commander, company commander. And in order to be an officer, you have to have a college degree. So started out at Army ROTC at UMass. Me and a buddy of mine actually that I met, my neighbor, who also wanted to go. He wanted to go overseas. His brother was his brother was in Iraq at the time. And then we ran into because the Marine Corps does a terrible job of advertising its officer corps. Okay. Everyone sees the cool Marine Corps commercials, but the officer corps for the enlisted side, but the officer corps doesn't do a very good job. So we came across this guy accidentally who talked about the Marine Corps, and I heard Marines my whole life, and I was like, that sounds cool. And then I saw a picture of the dress blues, and I was like, man, that's a cool uniform. I think I like that one. I think I like that one better. And I ended up switching over to the Marine Corps side, and so that's kind of a very high level about what led me to the Marine Corps. And then just to give you some familiarity with what that path looks like so if you're enlisted, you go to boot camp and you go to your MOS school, your MOS being your military occupational specialty, basically what your job in the military is going to be. Mm-hmm. So you go to boot camp, MOS school, and then you're kind of in the fleet. For an officer, you have to go to OCS, which is Officer Candidate School, which is kind of like a haze fest. It's kind of like a war of attrition where they try to make everybody quit. That was in Quantico down in Virginia. Yeah. You graduate OCS and you go into TBS, which is the basic school, which is also in Quantico, which is 6 months, and that's where you do a lot of everything from patrol to artillery, indirect fires to the academic piece, understanding, the math behind how an artillery shell works and, everything. And then from TBS, you go to your MOS school. So whatever your MOS is as an officer, then you do that. And then following your MOS school, that's when you then get your assignment in the fleet, wherever that may be. So I don't know if that was too much detail or too little detail, but just let me know if you need me to go into anything in any more detail.
So after you enlisted, did you go to boot camp?
Yeah, so I went to OCS, which is kind of like it's like the officer form of boot camp. It's a little bit more focused on leadership than enlisted boot camp is, and there's only one OCS. So there's two Marine Corps boot camps, East Coast, West Coast. One at Parris Island and in the Carolinas, and the other out at Camp Pendleton in California. For OCS, there's only one in Quantico. Good old Marine Corps base Quantico. And so that's OCS is considered the officer boot camp. And then TBS, the basic school, is kind of an extension of that, where it goes more from like getting hazed every day in the woods of Quantico to more of like the academic piece, understanding. So TBS, just to give you an example, again, it's 6 months, so it's a little bit longer, but you focus on there everything from like basic platoon commander stuff, like how to command a platoon or a small unit on a patrol. In our case, the urban warfare, counterinsurgency was the big. That was what we were doing at the time.
Yeah.
So Iraq and Afghanistan. So it was much more because doctrinally, and TJ, if I get too much going on a tangent,
no, you're good.
Let me know. But doctrinally, the Marine Corps is an amphibious asset. So the Marine Corps is under the Department of the Navy, and so before the GWAT, or the Global War on Terror, in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Marine Corps had a very amphibious mission, which was, the Marine Corps is meant to be partner with the Navy and insert amphibiously via the water to, the shores of Tripoli or Haiti. We had a lot of work in Haiti back in the earlier 2000s, but because of what was going on in the Middle East, the burden was too high for the Army, and the Marine Corps is better than the Army. And I'm kind of biased, but so we always joke that the Army needed the Marine Corps' help. So the Marine Corps actually, since for the whole global war on terror, took on the Army mission, that land warfare mission. And it's funny because we've done it for so long, the Marine Corps started to try and go back to its doctrinal role, and no one knows what to do because no one that's been in has even experienced a pre-GWAT Marine Corps. So
you just haven't trained on a lot of that material. And
we were just, when I was in, it was just rotations. You were going, Iraq or Afghanistan back home and deploying it back home. So there was no real focus on that amphibious piece.
When you finished like OCS and your MOS and all that, what did you end up like? What was your first gig after you were kind of out there?
Sure. So my MOS, I got assigned. I had a weird trajectory in the Marine Corps, to be quite honest. But I was assigned. I was initially a communications officer, and so I took over my first fleet assignment. I was the S6, or the communications officer at 2nd Tanks, or 2nd Tank Battalion at Camp Lejeune.
Okay.
And so there's all different types of units within the Marine Corps. Obviously, you've got infantry units, tank units, just comm units, logistics units, everything you could imagine. So I was a platoon commander at 2nd Tank. So I took over. It was about a 60 Marine platoon, and I was dual hatting. So I was a platoon commander of the comm platoon, and then I was one of the staff officers for the battalion. So the battalion commander has 6 staff officers that are his direct advisors. So I was the direct advisor for everything communications within 2nd Tanks.
Okay.
So that was my first assignment. And if you'd like, I can take you through like the rest of the assignments. I don't know.
Again, love to hear about that.
You guys just let me know. I can talk forever about this stuff.
No, you're good. You're good.
And so, at the time, we're all like, I didn't really care. I didn't really care where I wanted to deploy. That was the whole reason that I joined, because I wanted to go overseas. It's funny, when I joined initially in 2008, everything was Iraq. We all, everything was Iraq war was still, was still very, very heavy. It was very focused on. And by the time I finished all my training and I got out of Quantico, finished all my training probably like late 2009, there was a big shift from Operation Iraqi Freedom to Operation Enduring Freedom in Afghanistan. So we all joined thinking we're going to go to Iraq, and then we all get, once we're in the fleet, it's it's all Afghanistan at that time. So, okay. So my next role was I applied for a role on an ETT, or an embedded training team, and at the time, so our mission in Afghanistan, aside from dealing with insurgents and the Taliban and Al Qaeda and all that, was to train up the Afghan security forces, or ANSAF, being the military and the police, to be able to be self-sustaining, so they could operate themselves, which never worked, by the way. But so that was really the concurrent mission to fighting the bad guys, was also training the good guys to be able to fight the bad guys on their own. So we had these things called ETTs, or A teams, or embedded training teams, that you would get embedded within an Afghan unit, and you would live with them, fight with them, train them, evaluate them, do all that. And so I really wanted to be on one of those teams. So there's an application process, a selection process. And so I ended up getting selected for one of those teams, where I was embedded, attached to 8th Marine Regiment, which is an infantry regiment. And so my team was attached, that reported directly to the commander, and we were embedded in the ANA, or the Afghan National Army. So there was 18 of us, and we were there. We got, again, embedded with this unit to do everything from admin, intelligence, operations, logistics, medical, communications, the whole array of functions that we specialize in the Marine Corps. So so that was my deployment to Afghanistan. I spent 13 months embedded within the ANA. We kind of we're all over really the whole country with this team. This was in 2000, pretty much all of 2011 into 2012. And then I came back to take over another staff officer role at 8th Marine Regiment, and then back to my parent unit of 2nd Tank Battalion before I went out. So I can go more into the deployment if you want, or other stuff. Just
Yeah, I think what would be really good for Liam to understand is you're one of the first people we talked to that was we talked to somebody else who was embedded with like a unit in Korea. Being curious, like your experience being embedded with people with such a very different culture from what we have. Like, how did you get to know them and try to build trust because you were with them every day and like you were there to help them? Like, what was that experience like?
It was an experience. It was so there was a lot of so for every deployment you have what's called a workup, and so you have at least a 6-month period where for any deployment where you're training, you're working up and gearing up to get ready to do what you're going to do over there. So our workup was very specific, where and the nature of our mission was a little bit different because it was just us. Kind of in the middle of nowhere with this team. So we kind of all had to be the jack of all trades. So we did, everything from language training to cultural training, understanding, customs and courtesies, which is customs and courtesies are a big deal with the Afghans. If you do the wrong thing, they're very, Afghanistan is a very theocratic or religiously based country, and customs and courtesies are very important. So we had to really understand all the, all the subjective, customs, and make sure we don't, just ruin a mission based on, shaking someone's hand with a glove on as opposed to with a glove off.
Really? Okay.
Then we did everything from, a lot of weapons training. We all had to be. So officers typically don't drive the MRAPs and the MAT-Vs, or the big tank looking trucks that we had overseas, but we all had to be qualified on all the crew served weapons, everything from the Mark 19 grenade launchers to the 50 cals to the 240s. We all had to be able to drive the mine rollers and the MAT-Vs and the MRAPs because we were a combination of officer enlisted, but we had to understand everything because, when you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere and someone gets hurt or something goes wrong, you have to be able to pick up the slack. And we can't just have, a single point of failure with an individual that is the only person that can do that job. So it was everything from that, the operational piece and the tactical piece to the cultural piece. And so you can sit in the classroom and learn about customs and courtesies all you want, but it's much different when you get there and you're embedded with these people. First of all, landing in Afghanistan, I was, what was I, 24 years? I'd say, it's like landing on Mars, right?
Really?
It looks very different. It's very, the second you touch down, there's an ID being or an explosion being tripped, 100 feet away, and you're just like, oh, this is kind of a real thing. It's different. It's the transitioning out of the classroom into the real world. But so going in there and developing these relationships, it doesn't happen right away. Like, rapport building is hugely important. They're not going to listen or respect you if they don't. I shouldn't say they're not going to listen to what you have to say. They're not going to absorb your information unless they respect you, and they're not going to respect you unless they can see that you have a respect, for them. And so that in doing so, a lot of it's just spending time with them, being on the field with them, like enduring hardships with them, and then being able to, teach them stuff, help solve their problems. But it's very complicated because I'm trying to be as diplomatic as possible when I talk about stuff, but Afghanistan was never meant to host a democracy like we initially anticipated. Right. It's a very tribal country. They don't really care about a central government. They care much more about their tribes. That's just how Afghanistan has always been. It's how they always will be. And so the Afghan National Army, who was the ones we were working with, who was who were fighting the insurgency to some degree. A lot of them are Taliban, I would say, or had ties to Taliban. That were also kind of dipping in both pools because one, they wanted a paycheck or they thought they were going to get a visa home. A lot of them were there and they were very dedicated to the cause. Some of them were just there for a paycheck. Some of them were, we had a lot of guys that would turn on us. Really? Blue on blue stuff. But so it was all kind of a mix because the Taliban to a lot of them wasn't a bad organization, right? The Taliban to them, were, if you remember, back the Taliban were who the U.S. supported back in the, before this war
against the Soviets.
So, the Taliban was viewed much differently internally than we viewed them. So there was all different types of personalities within Afghanistan, all different types of just like here, there's all different types of folks. So we had to be able to, first of all, learn kind of the dynamics of what that was, and then work with it accordingly, And so, for us, like, yes, we're working with them and we're on the same team, but you still don't walk alone at night through an Afghan base, through an AA base. You still had to be, you're not going unarmed anywhere, even on your quote unquote friendly territory. But I made a lot of really good close connections. I know a handful of them, really good, solid, ANA soldiers that were killed fighting. Really good, dedicated individuals. We had, and I should point out an important piece of getting to know, probably the most important piece of being able to communicate with them is our interpreters. I'm sure you guys have heard about. That's actually a great movie I just watched recently with Jake Gyllenhaal. Usually I don't like military movies because I think they're so inaccurate, but this one was actually pretty accurate. Anyways, it had to do with an interpreter, but
we'll look it up.
They're the buffer between us and them, and they do some, they're just regular folks that we hire, and we don't really pay them a ton of money at all. We pay them really nothing. and they're not soldiers, but they're putting their lives on the line to, they're doing every operation with us. They're in our, they're getting blown up. They're doing everything that the Marines do. But they're just not, they're not able to carry, weapons or anything like that. So they're there strictly to help us communicate with other Afghans. And so,
Okay.
they're, a lot of times you're talking to someone, you'll get an elbow in the ribs or something. And one of them will be like, yeah, don't do that. Can't do that. Do this instead. Don't say that. This is what you want to say.
Mhm.
And so without them, especially in the first getting there, understanding all those customs and courtesies, they were a huge piece in being able to, get to know, get to know the whole landscape and the dynamics and how to function. And then after, you're there for a bit, it just becomes second nature and you understand, and then you're the one telling the new guys, hey, don't take that glove off to shake that, his hand. And, and there's other stuff too. Like, we would laugh, like the first time I met with one of the higher ups at the unit that we were embedded in. We went for a walk to talk about what the plan was, and we're walking next to each other, and he grabs my hand and starts holding my hand as we're walking. As American men, very uncomfortable, right?
Right.
Not something we typically, not something that you and I would typically do if we're, having a chat walking down the road. And immediately my interpreter said, it's a show of like respect and friendship. Just go with it. And I'm like, okay. And so, again, not the most comfortable thing, but you want to work hard to, to gain their respect and show them that we're here to help them and assist them and all that. So I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, that's
your
awesome. That's a great answer. It's such a complex, different society, right? And then like being embedded with them, and it's like a 180, right, from what you see day to day here.
Yeah. It's extremely complicated. Again, it's just like, it's an entirely different, just everything from the landscape to the culture to their history to their food. Ate a lot of goat. And again, you don't want to deny them, you don't want to not eat their food that they're cooking for you.
Right.
So I started out kind of being grossed out by goat, and then by the end of my deployment, I mean, I loved a good goat stew,
piece.
But yeah, so it's just, I would say it's a lot of those, I would say like the nuances are the most important and the hardest to learn, as opposed to just like understanding in your workup, like, this is how you say hello in Dari, but understanding the nuances behind like how to not insult folks and how to show respect. That was the most challenging piece of it for sure.
Did you have the opportunity to take on like additional roles and other deployments, or like there were other experiences that you had to, or when you came back to the States, were you primarily in the States after that deployment?
Yeah. So when I came back to the States, you have to do, there's like this there's, a pretty significant debrief time, like depending on like what you've done over there. You kind of got to heal up from stuff. And then, so I was in for 4 years. So at this point, when I came back from this deployment, I had a choice to either, I think I had about 6 or 7 months left in my contract. So I had the choice to either, re-up my contract and extend, which I was kind of on the fence about, which was a tough decision, or get out and do something different. So ultimately I chose after then. I was just, because I was, I was a little beat up from that deployment. So, I was looking to, I was looking to do something else at that time. I mean, it was 2012, and that's also kind of when the GWAT was starting to ramp down. And so deployments, again, I was there. I joined a deploy, and they were, if I wanted to stay in, it's like, as an officer, you have to go in, you have to do after your initial. So I went in as a second lieutenant. I got promoted to first lieutenant, I think overseas, or might have been right before or I deployed. And then I came back, I picked up captain. And then after that, that first 4 or 5 years is typically when you pick up captain, you have to go do what's called a B billet. So you have to leave the fleet and go either teach at Quantico, be a platoon commander, or an instructor at OCS or TBS. You have to go be, command a recruiting station. And at the time, those are things like, I was, I either wanted to deploy again or I wanted to go do something else. I just, I wasn't interested in. I definitely didn't want to go back to OCS and teach. I had enough of OCS one time. I didn't want to go back there again. So, so that was kind of my platoon commander at 2nd Tanks over at 8th Marine Regiment, which is where who I deployed with for the ETT. Then I came back took over a little bit of a company command, and then back to my staff officer role at my original unit, 2nd Tank Battalion, and then from 2nd Tanks is where I EAS'd, or my end of active service.
Is there anything you wish you knew before you joined?
Is there any part of, do I wish I rejoined?
No, is there anything you wish you knew before you joined?
Oh, like a million things. Yeah, I mean, just, I mean, I think anytime you finish like a sports season or anything, you when you look back, you're like, oh man, I wish I worked a little bit harder at doing this, or I wish I was a little bit more committed to doing this. I think, going into training, there's a lot of stuff I wish I knew that would have been hugely helpful. The biggest thing in the military schools, especially one of the schools that are attrition based, they're trying to make you quit, is everything is a game. Like everything is, you're being put in a situation that's impossible to succeed in, and the goal is not for you to succeed. It's to see how you can deal with failure and adversity, and see how you respond in those high stress situations.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when you're going in, you're competitive, and you want to win at everything. It can be extremely stressful when you're put in a situation where you just can't win. And a lot of guys, very capable dudes, will psych themselves out, and they'll get eliminated because they've stressed themselves out because they're not understanding what the purpose of certain schools are. Again, the purpose of the schools are to put you in these high stress situations where it's impossible to win, because just sometimes when you're overseas, you're in a situation where it's impossible to win, and it's and compromise is the only solution. And sometimes either side of the compromise aren't ideal. So again, as an officer, huge focus on leadership, obviously, and a huge part of leadership is being able to maintain a sense of calm and prevent a sense of panic, because especially when you're in a high stress situation, panic is contagious. And if you have someone in a leadership position that does get panic or stress, even just the way you talk on the radio, that can spread in a millisecond, and then everybody turns into kind of a high stress situation, and people's judgment is affected and all that. So that was a big thing I wish I knew going into Quantico, was like, it's a game. It's a game to test your ability to deal with high stress situations. I think that would have made it, less stressful for me, being like, okay, I just have to figure out how to stay calm and just deal with discomfort and then just get through it. So,
okay.
And yeah, of course, like in retrospect in the fleet, like there's a lot of stuff you don't know until afterwards, or those stuff you don't know until you do it. I wish I paid more attention to learning Dari and Pashto during language training, because there are certain cases where I'm like, oh man, I wish I knew what you were, I really wish I knew what that, I know I've heard that word, but I can't remember what it means. So stuff like that, where, when you're doing your workup and you're just tired and you're like, yeah, whatever, this language, and you're thinking back to sitting through like Spanish in high school, and you kind of zone out. I wish I paid more attention to those nuanced type training. That certainly were occasions overseas where that would have helped quite a bit. But yeah, I think the big things looking back that I wish I'd known earlier were just really just had to do with going into certain schools and training, and and understanding that staying even not out of school in real practice, that like staying calm in high stress situations is like the gold standard of being a good leader. And like looking back, there were certainly occasions where as an officer, as a leader, where I let stress get the better of me, and I look back, I'm like, oh, I wish I handled that better. But there's always going to be those, you're always going to Monday morning quarterback yourself for sure. But I think that'd be the main thing for sure.
Okay. What's something that you've learned from your time in the service that you've been able to apply to your life after?
I I mean, I think the biggest thing, transitioning out of, after the Marine Corps, I was with the New Hampshire State Police for a bit. I left there to go to grad school, and now I'm kind of in the corporate world. But I've always been able to take that. This is what I was talking about, being able to stay calm and focused in high stress situations.
Okay.
That has been hugely valuable for me in any role. I remember at the police academy when people are stressed out. When I was at the police academy, I was constantly getting in trouble for laughing too much because you learn how to just kind of make fun in crappy situations. When you're when your feet are falling apart on a week-long hump in the rain, you learn to like be able to laugh with your buddy. And like, so I would, during the crappy situations and other places, I've always been able to kind of take that commiseration ability with me and just kind of laugh at that type of stuff. And that's been helpful. Even in the corporate world when, the misery has to do with, meetings and travel and all that stuff. It still is valuable being able to, just kind of stay calm and have a sense of humor about it. So yeah, staying calm and having a sense of humor in crappy situations, I think is a universal skill that is beneficial.
And you're grounded because you've been through more serious situations, right, than a lot of those people have. So you have a different perspective that you can kind of offer back to everyone, it sounds like.
Yeah, I think so. I think even now I got to remind myself this isn't so bad,
right.
And then you're able to kind of get some perspective on it. But even now, I got out, let's see, 2024, I got out 12 years ago. So it's been a little while since I've been out.
Yeah.
And sometimes that escapes me a little bit, and I'll have to ground myself and be like, it could be worse. You've done worse. It's not that bad. But yeah, certainly being able to have that perspective is valuable.
Do you have any advice for someone that's thinking about joining the military?
I could write a book on it. I think it depends. Like, I think it would start with you. I'm assuming you're referring to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are you thinking of doing in the military, or do you have any initial, is there a certain branch or occupational specialty?
Probably the same thing as you, like the Marine Corps.
Marine Corps. Then I would ask, okay, what, do you want to go, that enlisted or that officer route? Because they're very different. Officer being more that leadership route, and the enlisted route more being specialized into a certain job.
I'd probably go officer to go to college.
Want to go to college? Yeah. I would say, want to be an officer, stay in shape, which I'm sure you do. I know you say you play lacrosse. Like, don't go to college. Don't go to college. Here's my main piece of advice. If you want to go the officer route, don't go to college and lose all the athletic capability that you built up in high school. Carry that competitiveness into college, even if you're not playing sports, and maintain that, because it's hard to get back and you lose it. It's easy to get back when you're younger, of course, and you're 20, 21 years old. But I would say stay in shape, make sure you can run. Don't ignore the strength training, and then, the physical piece, I think, will breed, mental toughness for sure. And I think, physical capability and mental toughness, if you have those and you have a desire, you really can't lose. I would just make sure, really investigate the various branches and jobs that interest you, because a lot of the times what you think something isn't really what it is. And so I would, someone like me or, anyone else that served, ask as many questions to as many people that have done it as you can. I wish when I was going in, I had some more people to bounce some stuff off of. But I would say, yeah, really, really research what you want to do, and don't be afraid to change your mind. Like, if suddenly you realize, I kind of want to do this. This really is what's calling my name. Again, do what you want to do. They're all cool. They all have their value, but of course, I'm biased towards the Marine Corps. I think the Marine Corps is the best. So, I'll certainly support your decision there. But
so everybody, we talked to like Navy, Army, Marines, like,
yeah.
So everyone's like, mine's the best. So I'd love to hear, like, why do you think Marines are better than the Army or the Navy?
Mm-hmm.
So the Marine Corps, the attitude in the Marine Corps and the discipline in the Marine Corps is extremely different. Having worked with all the branches, there is a discipline, and even the other branches know this, and they'll say this. There's a discipline in the Marine Corps that you won't find anywhere else, especially when it comes to customs and courtesies and tradition and history. And the Marine Corps is very big on history, very big on tradition, which I love, and I always loved. The Marine Corps balls, which are our annual celebration, are very big on tradition and customs and what the Marine Corps, what the Marines did back in the, 1700s, back in the day, back to 1775 and, the Tun Tavern in Philadelphia where the Marine Corps was founded. But so I think the discipline piece and the attitude, I think, is what makes the Marines a little bit different. And you ask people deployed too, or other branches that have deployed with the Marines, and they'll all say that they're just like wild savages, and I love that. I think that's I think that's cool. And you'll never have anyone. The Marine Corps is built to not quit, which I think is what not that the other branches will quit, but they just have this very like this overconfident, like cocky attitude that I think is fantastic, and I think it's hugely valuable in adverse situations. And I think again that customs, courtesies, tradition, discipline is what really sets the Marine Corps apart.
That's awesome.
Back in the early 2000s, up to 2012, when the global war on terror was kind of in full view, it was very different compared to right now when the GWAT is kind of in the rearview mirror. You see that no one really, it seems, not that people don't care, but it's not the main point of focus anymore. And so you have a lot less people kind of paying attention to the military side of things, even though their military is still highly active. So I think it's great that you're doing this. It's because I've noticed over time, it seems to, again, not that people don't care, but it's not in the public, within the public eye like it used to be. And so it's good to see, folks like you doing stuff like this. I think it's a great idea.
Great. Thank you.
Good on you. Only 14. Good for you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you for listening to this edition of Heroic Reflections, honoring the stories behind the service, hosted by Liam Steele.
This podcast is part of the NORCAS Podcast Network. Check out more podcasts at podomatic.com/NORCAM.